Hey guys, Laura here from What Laura Likes. So today we are talking about confession. We're talking about how to prepare for confession. We're also going to be talking about the difference between mortal sins and venial sins and how to kind of understand the difference. So if you're interested to see how I prepare for confession, stay tuned. Hey guys, so starting out, these days I go to confession about once a month. It actually averages more like every 5 to 6 weeks just because things come up. I do think that the more you go, the better. That when you go to confession, there is such an extreme grace given, and you just, you guys have gone to confession, you leave the confessional, you feel like a new person. You feel like your true self, like your true good self. And every time we raise our voice to our kids, or just any little itty bitty thing comes up, it starts to stain our hearts. Let's talk about the difference between venial sin and mortal sin, because venial sin can be forgiven lots of different ways. Venial sin can be forgiven just by saying I'm sorry to Jesus, by holy water, signing the cross, prayer, taking the Holy Eucharist. There's lots of ways for venial sin to be forgiven. So people usually ask, well, if I'm not committing mortal sins, why do I need to go to confession? But here's the thing. Do you remember every single little thing you've done ever to somebody since your last confession? No. And even if you go once a week, you're not remembering. Even if you go once a day, you're probably not realizing all the little ways that you hurt somebody else, right? Like my priest the other day was talking at our Crusade, he was saying, you either are making decisions that are taking you towards Christ, towards salvation, or they're taking you away from them. And so we all throughout our day make decisions that take us both towards Jesus, but also, away from him. And being cognizant enough to ask for forgiveness for every single little time we step us away is humanly impossible. And so when you go to confession, obviously not only the sins that you have, asked for forgiveness for, but you always say, these and any other sins in my past life, or any other sins I haven't mentioned before, and those, everything is washed away. Now that doesn't mean that you don't owe, some kind of penance, and it doesn't mean that you don't owe some time in purgatory for it, but those are other talks. But you are completely forgiven, and so that can only be found in the confessional, and that's why it's so powerful. So venial sins are any sin that hurts Jesus, that moves you away from Jesus, that is not a mortal sin. And there is some saint, you guys can tell me which one it is, who said that we should not take venial sins lightly because they literally hurt Jesus every time we do them. So first I pull out my catechism, right? Because John specifically at Catholic for Redneck was like, you need to talk about venial versus mortal sin. And if you guys don't follow him already, go to his channel. He's one of my favorite YouTubers. He's one of the first YouTubers that I connected with. Before I connected with all the Catholic Mama YouTubers, I totally connected with John. He's been very supportive, and he has a really great channel. He was a Protestant for 50 years, converted to Catholicism. His wife is a revert, and he has great content explaining, especially to Protestants, explaining the differences between the different beliefs. So I pulled out my catechism, and venial and mortal sin are addressed in 1456 and 1457, but it does not address the 3 criteria for a sin to be mortal. So then I pull out my kiddos' First Communion Baltimore Catechism, because I know they talk about venial and mortal sin in here. And again, it says mortal sin is a deadly sin because mortal sin makes us enemies of God and robs our souls of his grace. You guys, a mortal sin, the Catholic Church teaches that if a mortal sin, you are not in a state of grace, you will not go to heaven, you will not collect the $200, you go straight to hell if you die in a state of mortal sin. Huge problem. It has to be a grave matter, and you have to do it consciously. So I couldn't find the 3 criteria in here, but I love this little image of these 2 kids, and one of them has Jesus in his soul, grace in his soul, Christ lives in us, mortal sin in the soul, Christ is crucified in us. And it says those who die in mortal sin are punished forever in the fire of hell. And then venial sin is a lesser sin, but still a sin. And it goes on to some. This is a really nice booklet if your kids are going through First Communion soon. But lucky me, I got the internet here, and the 3 conditions, this is dummies.com, but these are the conditions I've come across time and time again when I've looked them up. So the 3 conditions for mortal sins: it has to be a grave matter. The act itself is intrinsically evil and immoral. The full knowledge. The person must know that what they're doing or planning on doing is evil and immoral. And then you must have deliberate consent. The person must freely choose to commit the act or plan to do it. So it's pretty darn hard to actually commit a mortal sin. When you guys get your examination of conscience, and those are going to be what I talk about next, it's just lists sins, but it doesn't mean like, it's not like, hey, these are your mortal sins and these are your venial sins. They're all mixed in together, and some of them could be mortal sins if it's a grave matter, which you could argue all sins are grave matter, but you know, there's varying degrees, I would say. But then you also have to, like, you have to know it's evil. And so I know for myself, I've done things that could have been a mortal sin, but I didn't understand that they were evil. Like, I didn't understand the extent of the severity of the issue. And so that's the case for like a lot of people. So I'm not going to go into like what could or couldn't be a mortal sin, because it's really individual. And I know that John was saying that his priest was saying that he's only, over the course of his like 20-some years, he only thinks that he's heard, like, to him, he's only heard like a mortal sin like 4 times. If you have a mortal sin, you have to go to confession before you receive the Eucharist. That's the only way around it, because it's actually dangerous for you to receive communion, receive the Eucharist in a state when you're not in a state of grace, which is why obviously anyone who's not a full member of the Catholic Church can't receive the Eucharist, because they may not be in the state of grace because they haven't gone to confession, and there's issues around like the safeties. And I'll put the passage down, but St. Paul talks about it, I think in Corinthians somewhere, about how you really need to be careful when you receive the host, because it's just so powerful, because you really are putting Jesus into your soul. And if your soul is removed from Jesus, then there's going to be some issues there.